The class AP US History, Mr. Goyette. This is AP US History B, continuing a lecture on Unit 2. Just want to apologize for the fact that this, for some reason, keeps cutting me off at about 6 minutes. So I'll try to wrap everything up here. We were just discussing tuberculosis, typhoid fever, and other things. Of course, medical science was in the midst of a major revolution. Louis Pasteur's recent discovery that germs cause infection and disease created a new science of microbiology. And led the way for the development of vaccines and other prevention of diseases. But tuberculosis, typhoid, diphtheria, and pneumonia, all now curable, was still the leading causes of death. Infant mortality declined in between 1877 and 1900, but the decline was gradual. A great drop did not come until the 1920s. Just picking up from where I was left off in that last segment. Now let's try to get through the remainder of these questions. Significant medical developments. Okay, let's see. McKinley Tariff. The McKinley Tariff used high tariff duties to promote new industries, and for example, the text points out that it promoted tin plate for packaging and canned goods to try to stimulate the tin manufacturing industry. The trouble is that's a very inefficient and in some ways wasteful way of doing the packaging. So in the long run, it wasn't very helpful. In the 1890s, the American electorate rejected the Republican legislative activism by crushing the party in congressional elections. This was because we talked earlier about stimulating the economy through industry, and then the economy struggling, and then having to go back and regulate that economy. There was this kind of back and forth relaxation of regulation. So the Republican legislative activism was crushed the party in the congressional elections. Which of the following is not true of American farmers in from 1865 to 1890? And it gives you a list of possibilities there, and of course their productivity during this time did increase. Farm mortgages were common, and prices for their crops declined. However, their purchasing power did not decline, it increased. Despite the fact that farmers received less for their crops, their purchasing power actually increased, and this is noted on page 579 of your textbook. The Colored Farmers National Alliance ended when a posse lynched 15 cotton pickers who were on strike. We talked about this earlier about Jacob Coxey marching to Washington to demand roads projects to stimulate the economy and to employ the jobless. And of course, he was met by police and turned around. The Pullman strike of 1894 was significant in that it affirmed the court injunction as a new weapon against labor. If you remember, the group that was affected most seriously by the new immigration to America from Southern and Eastern Europe were the miners. That's where the fight over new immigration was most vehemently expressed in the mines. Midwestern miners were very angry at the inclusion of the immigrants into the mines because they would work for a lot less money and work longer hours. So the efforts to unionize were often broken up. Support for free silver coinage grew rapidly in 1894 to 1896 because the issue offered a simple, compelling answer for the economic crisis. It was seen as a kind of panacea, a cure-all measure to solve the economic problems. The economic problems were much larger than just the monetary unit, but that was the issue that was brought up again and again as a solution. Which best describes the decision that shattered the Populist Party in 1897? That was the nomination of the Democratic candidate of William Jennings Bryan for presidency, because his pro-labor, often seen as a direct socialist platform, his nomination for the Democratic Party proved to be a poor one for the Democratic Party down the road. During the 1890s, writers who rejected Romanticism often wrote regional stories depicting everyday life. This is moving away from Romanticism and Gothic literature and any sort of romantic novels. These were stories that we'll later talk about with the Jungle by Upton Sinclair, and they're showing these the horrible situations or mundane life in the cities, which best describes the source of agrarian anger and protests in the late 19th century. Well, farmers perceived their social and economic position as declining throughout the period, so they were very angry that the industrial centers were becoming the squeaky wheel that was getting all the grease, and so farmers felt that they were getting the short end of the stick during this period in history. Let's see. The leaders of the Southern Farmers Alliance tried to capture the Democratic Party at this time in response to that, and talking earlier about stimulating the economy through industrial growth, the Panic of 1893, and Republican policy to regulate industry. Remember, it's talked about in your textbook that the original urge is to stimulate the economy through growth of industry. This does not end up working. In the Panic of 1893, the Republican policy is then to regulate it. So much like say the Bush administration's trying to stand on a kind of Reaganomics platform of free market, laissez-faire capitalism. Eventually, the Bush will come around and say, well, as much as I'd like to be a laissez-faire capitalist, I'm going to intervene here and put forward a stimulus package that, in some ways, is all the markings of a socialist intervention. So this kind of back and forth of having social policies that include democratic or socialist intervention or governmental intervention into the free market, they often come after there's been a long period of deregulation, because the market doesn't, unlike the theory of Adam Smith, this idea that self-interest will regulate the market naturally, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes corruption gets out of hand and the market has a kind of false rise and a false boom that precipitates a major decline once that bubble is burst. McKinley's first term in office was characterized by gold discoveries that inflated the currency, the need to regulate the effects of industrialism, and increased economic prosperity overall, and presidential activism. He saw himself as the decider, to use a Bush term. By 1900, McKinley had begun prodding the Republicans toward a new policy of regulating and controlling industry. This, of course, right now would not be a traditional Republican platform. However, at this time, the Republican position was to control and manipulate the market through government intervention. That's going to cover most of information. I want you to go back and reread chapters 20 and 19, or 19 and 20 before you begin your quiz, and hopefully this will be the last little video I have to do for this, but if not, there'll be another one to follow. Good luck on your quiz, and call or email if you have any questions.